is Medea Benjamin with the group CODEPINK. Thank you for coming. This press conference is in anticipation of the drone summit that we are organizing on Saturday. The details are in the packets we gave you, but it's the first time that people are coming together from many different communities. We have people coming with direct witness on the ground in places like Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen. We have members of the human rights community that have been working on the issue of drone strikes and trying to get more accountability and transparency. We have people from the community of activists that have been protesting drone strikes. We have members of the legal community that have been going to the courts on these issues. And we have members of the scientific community who are worried about the expansion of drone technology, where this is leading us, and how we can get some kind of international regulations about the use of drones. So we'll be all together on Saturday talking about drone proliferation and how we can manage that in a way that respects our international law, democratic rights, and gives us transparency and accountability that we expect in a democratic society. We're going to start today with our guest, Shahzad Akbar, who is a lawyer coming from Pakistan who's been representing the drone victims there. We had to fight hard to get Shahzad into the United States. He had been granted visas previously when he was working with the Agency for International Development and other U.S. government agencies, but once he started working with drone victims, it seems like it became difficult to get him into the United States. In fact, he's been trying for the past year to come here. We launched a grassroots campaign that had thousands of people contacting the State Department, the U.S. Embassy, representatives in Congress, and it looked like that was finally successful, so we're very delighted that he is here to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Medea. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shahzad Akbar. As Medea pointed out, I'm very happy and glad to be here in US finally after 14 months. I'm here for the drone summit, which is after 2 days, and I would request you to come along because I'll be talking there that why I was stopped for 14 months and why it was so important for the security establishment of United States to stop people like me from coming to United States and reach out to as many people as possible. First of all, I have to say thank you to Medea and CODEPINK and their efforts, tireless efforts, because for the last 14 months, I was told that I cannot go to US because the NSA or other administrative process stops me from coming here. But what was the reason, the actual reason for stopping me was that I wanted to bring, and I've been trying along with my other colleagues in Pakistan, to bring out human live stories of civilian victims. Because there is one narrative which is being put out there that drone strikes are making United States and rest of the international community safer. They're taking out the bad guys, but the facts on ground are very different. Because I would ask you just to imagine, because we all know that Taliban are the bad guys. This is a phrase which we have been told in the last 10, 12 years. Now just imagine if you're living in a world where Taliban are the only one who get to report on what they are doing to their victims. They are the ones who come out, first they do something and then they tell you that we have done this thing and this is right. That was the only information you were getting, because this is what is happening with drone strikes in Pakistan. CIA is so far the only source of information, and just look at the quality of information they give you, nothing. They say nothing officially about drone strikes. Who are they killing? Who are these people? What are their names? Okay, I've asked them several times that don't give us the details of what they've done. Can you give us at least the names of people you've killed? But so far, no names have come out, apart from few dozen people who are the so-called high-value targets. So in Drone Summit, I will try to highlight some of the cases we've been working on, There's a huge number of women, children, and elderly and incapacitated people who have been killed in such drone strikes, and I see no reason, and I would think that no American would think of any reason that why these people were so dangerous that the US needed to go out there and destroy 200 or 300 years of its civil rights progress they have made on human rights and having some sort of system and civilization by starting out this barbaric war in one part of the world and creating more enemies for you. Now, what we're trying to achieve here, we will be talking more about it during the summit, but it's basically one simple thing: accountability and transparency into the drone war, which is being carried out. And initially, it was in few countries, but now it's spreading out. Today, we heard about the government approving the strikes in Yemen, and we were really confused reading about this this morning, because it seems to be giving CIA an authorization, which is a very wrong word to use for it, because authorization is something legal, and to me it's nothing legal what we're doing here, is that they can kill, they cannot kill if they know that someone is a low value target and he is of no consequence, he's some low level Al-Qaeda person. However, they can kill if they don't know that person. So I just ask you to look into it and see what this authorization is talking about. But this is exactly what we are trying to achieve here. We are trying to bring lawsuits where we are suing the Pakistani government and the CIA officials who are involved in drone strikes, and through that we are bringing out human life stories, people who have been affected, who are they, what are their lives like, and who have they lost. And then also talk about what is the situation on ground in North Waziristan and South Waziristan, which is the epicenter of drone strikes. So far, there have been more than 300 strikes in Pakistan, having killed more than 3,000 people. The name which have been put out by, indirectly I would say, by CIA is not more than 50 to 60 people who are called to be high-value targets. There were some names who we think are high-value targets. We've only got to know about their existence only when they were killed, and we were told that they were really dangerous people. So, you know, there's a need and requirement to question this program, which is actually not making the world safer, but even more, putting us in a worse situation, because we're just supporting extremism, pushing people against the wall and asking them to hate America for the reasons which we are creating, because otherwise there's no reason for people which are thousands of miles away from you to be thinking that we need to do something against US. Why now? Because they're being pushed against the wall, and US government is attacking them, killing their children, attacking their houses. So I think there will be questions later on, and I'll be able to, or happy to answer anything you have.
Our next speaker is Pardis Kabriai. We are organizing the summit together with the UK group, legal group called Reprieve, and the Center for Constitutional Rights. Pardis is an attorney with the Center for Constitutional Rights. She was also one of the attorneys on the case of Al-Awlaki versus Obama.
Thank you, Medea, and thank you to CODEPINK and to all of you here. And I'm delighted to see Shahzad, who we've spoken to by Skype and the phone for over a year, but have never actually been able to meet in person, so this is a real pleasure. As Shahzad was saying, the United States is now trying to escalate in Yemen the drone program that it has been carrying out for years in Pakistan. And just today, as he said, there are reports that the White House has approved a new level of authority to the CIA and secret military forces called the Joint Special Operations Command. And these are the two entities that have been primarily involved in carrying out killings outside of recognized war zones. But this new authority grants them power to kill not only people who are designated and named on secret kill lists, but people whose identities are not known and who are targeted on the basis of patterns of behavior deemed to be suspicious on that basis alone. The risk of more people, more innocent people being killed as a result of these strikes, as we've seen in Pakistan already, is on top of deaths and injuries and destruction that has already occurred in Yemen. These strikes are not new, but this level of authority is new. Among the kinds of devastation that's already occurred and the deaths that have already occurred includes a particular incident in December of 2009, on December 17th of 2009. And this is a particular strike that CCR, the Center for Constitutional Rights, and the American Civil Liberties Union just last week filed a Freedom of Information Act request for seeking information about this strike, which resulted in more deaths as a result of one strike than anything that has been carried out in Yemen so far. The strike was on a rural community in a region of Yemen called Al-Majla. It resulted in at least 41 deaths, and including the deaths of 21 children. U.S. officials, including President Obama, say that its airstrikes and its drone strikes are not resulting in very many civilian casualties, or 0 civilian casualties in the case of a particular year in Pakistan. But they're not talking about strikes like this. These are incidents that the American public and the international community even don't know about. And the only reason we know about this particular strike is because of leaked cables by WikiLeaks, which months after this particular strike described a conversation between General Petraeus and the former president of Yemen, describing a meeting about this particular incident and making the U.S.'s responsibility clear. So our FOIA request is directed to 8 government agencies, including the Department of State, and 7 Defense Department agencies seeking information about the strike, more information. We know the U.S.'s role is already clear, but seeking more information about it as a way of trying to advance some kind of transparency about this program and about these strikes, and bringing to bear some kind of accountability for the deaths and injuries that have resulted. So far, there has been no accountability whatsoever by the U.S. government. So that is as far as the effect of the U.S. targeted killing program on foreign citizens who we know are bearing the brunt of this policy. But the U.S. has also made clear that U.S. citizens are also equally vulnerable to being targeted. We know that as a result of a case that CCR and the ACLU litigated that Medea mentioned, a case called Al-Awlaki versus Obama, which challenged an authorization that was reported in the media in January of 2010 for the targeted killing of a U.S. citizen in Yemen. We challenged that authorization. A year later, the administration actually carried out the strike, killing Anwar al-Awlaki and another U.S. citizen, Samir Khan. 2 weeks later, carried out another strike targeting an unknown individual that ended up killing Anwar al-Awlaki's son, a 16-year-old U.S. citizen, Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, and his 17-year-old Yemeni cousin. So U.S. citizens are clearly also part of these targets. I'll end by just saying, polls in the United States show that a majority of the U.S. public supports drone strikes by the U.S., but it is important to understand the context of those poll numbers, which is that the U.S. public at least knows very little about what the U.S. government is doing in its name. As Shahzad said, we don't know who is being killed, how many, why, the scope of the program. There's very little information, and what is known in terms of what is being felt and experienced by people who are being targeted in places like Pakistan and Yemen is halfway across the world. So the effort of this conference this weekend is to try to bring some of that information home, and to have speakers like Shahzad talking about what they are every day seeing and experiencing, and to discuss not only the legal dimensions of this program, but the political and ethical dimensions of killing by remote control, and to try to, here in the United States, build a movement, a stronger movement, to try to join with the one growing internationally. Thank you very much.
Next, we're going to switch gear to the U.S., where drones are already flying in U.S. airspace, but it's going to be proliferating tremendously in the coming years. And we are lucky to have participating in the Drone Summit and here today representatives from the ACLU that have been on the forefront of challenging this program both overseas and here at home. with the goal of trying to get more information out into the public view. So our next speaker is Jay Stanley, who is the Senior Policy Analyst with the Speech, Privacy, and Technology Program of the ACLU.
Thank you very much, Medea. So yeah, I focus on this aspect. The ACLU works on all aspects of this issue, but I focus on what I'm going to talk about today is the domestic surveillance aspect of this issue. Drones are coming to America, and we're facing the prospect of a significant new avenue for the routine surveillance of ordinary life in America. There's a range of technology from drones, from 737s to little-sized hummingbird ones. The technology is getting better and better. The resolution's improving. New imaging technologies are being developed. They're getting smarter with more analytics and more intelligence. They're able to coordinate. Multiple drones are able to coordinate with each other better. Systems are being developed that can watch vast regions pretty much at once. And what's really been holding back the deployment of drones in the United States to date has been the FAA, which has very legitimate safety concerns about having sort of flying robotic video cameras in our skies mixed in with all the other air traffic that's up there. But they've been under enormous political and economic pressure to loosen the regulations that they have in place. And Congress in February acted to significantly loosen the restrictions and speed up the domestic deployment of drones. They require the FAA to speed up the process by which it issues permission to government agencies to operate drones. It requires the FAA to allow a government public safety agency to operate any drone weighing less than 4.4 pounds, as long as certain conditions are met without having to get specific approval. It requires the FAA to create a comprehensive plan to accelerate the introduction of civil drones, which means those operated not by government agencies but by the private sector. And the FAA has to come up with this plan in 9 months after passage of the bill, enactment of the bill, and they have 18 months after that to publish a final rule that will allow civil operation of small drones under 55 pounds in the national airspace. So drones are coming. There's an enormous amount of pent-up demand by local police departments and others to use this technology. Operating a police manned aircraft or helicopter is very expensive. Drones may prove to be very, very cheap. We have learned that things that are very easy and inexpensive to do quickly become overdone. The EFF recently received from the FAA a list of certificates of authorization that the FAA has issued in recent years. 300 current active authorizations and 700 to 750 have been issued since 2006. And the list shows a range of government agencies, universities and colleges, city and town police departments, and defense contractors who have the very, very difficult to obtain special airworthiness certificates that are given to private sector participants. Our current privacy laws are not enough to protect our privacy in the face of this new technology. The Supreme Court has ruled that you do not have a Fourth Amendment right to privacy from aerial surveillance in a case called U.S. versus Sorello, and in other cases they have indicated that they may find that drones, because the type of surveillance that can be done from drones is so comprehensive and pervasive and sometimes uses new technologies, there's good reason to think that the Supreme Court may find that we have a lot of constitutional protection from aerial surveillance. But as it now stands, our privacy laws are not adequate, that we can be sure that our privacy will be protected. We had issued a report, there are copies out front, on protecting privacy from aerial surveillance, and there we have included some recommendations for a basic set of ground rules that we think need to be put in place to allow us to use drones and to gain the advantages that can be gained from that technology, whether it's finding a child lost in the wilderness or inspecting pipelines or what have you, without having to worry that every time we walk out of our front door that some eye in the sky is going to be tracking our every move. We say that the police should not be able to deploy drones except when they have specific and articulable grounds to think that they will reveal evidence relating to a specific act of wrongdoing, with a warrant where use of a drone will intrude on reasonable expectations of privacy, for example, looking in the window of a home, a time and geographically confined emergency situation, or reasonable non-law enforcement uses that don't substantially affect privacy, such as geological surveys. And we also call for image retention and sharing restrictions, public notice. The American public should know the extent to which the authorities are using drones. They should know what the rules of the road are, and those rules should be written and they should be public. They should be subject to democratic control. What we're seeing in the United States all too often is that local police departments, often with grants coming from the Federal Department of Homeland Security or Justice Department, are bypassing local democratic discussions about the balance between privacy and technology, what kind of technologies do we want and not want, and are just doing what I call policy making by procurement. They just go out and buy the stuff and they deploy it. And it short circuits what would normally be the democratic processes for considering these kinds of issues. And we think that there should be auditing and effectiveness tracking. So it's important, if we're to protect our nation's values at home as we need to abroad, that we put in place some good rules and protections to protect our privacy from what it was sure to be a rapidly developing technology. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Tom Barry. He works with the Center for International Policy, and he has been investigating drone use here in the United States, particularly along our southern border.
Thanks. The largest force in the world that's not military, that deploys Predators and Guardian drones, is the Department of Homeland Security. I started looking at the high-tech uses of border control, looking at the SBI net and all the problems with the virtual fence, the waste, the lack of congressional oversight, industry pressure, the lack of strategy. And I found that the very same things are happening with the drone program the Department of Homeland Security has. And what's more, it has these problems that Jay mentioned that are coming with these drones, the lack of any legal frameworks or regulations. So these drones are flying along the border. They're taking pictures along the border, and they're working with public safety law enforcement agencies as well. The director of the program sits on the board, or has sat on the board of the Industry Association of Drones. So there is this close pressure that existed with the SBI net program too, where Boeing was pushing this program. The very same thing has happened with General Atomics and the drone industry of the Department of Homeland Security. It goes beyond the issue of is this an effective program, because they are working now and encouraging local law enforcement to acquire drones. The Department of Homeland Security is giving grants to law enforcement agencies around the country to acquire drones. We think it's time that the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of Air and Marine gets the kind of close scrutiny that should have been given with the SBI net program. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll open up to questions now.
A question for Shahzad. The American military, or on the news today, they were saying that they're using patterns of people's movements to detect what they would call terrorists in Yemen. And how have they been doing it in the past? I mean, if they don't have the ground intelligence, like they say they don't have, how have they been detecting who they should kill and who they shouldn't?
Well, it's very much like you said, that if they look at the pattern from the drone cameras, and what we have learned so far about drone cameras is that they cannot distinguish between man and woman. They can only see people or like images moving, so there is no face recognition. So let's suppose if they were looking for bin Laden and they see a bin Laden from the drone, they wouldn't see. They would have to rely on the ground intelligence that this person is supposedly Bin Laden and they have to take the shot. On the second angle of this is they're looking at the pattern. So, for example, if the manual says, while sitting in US, that this is how terrorists or supposed terrorists would behave in northern Waziristan agency of Pakistan, then they would have probably a checklist and say, okay, these are the 3 things they're doing. So, for example, one thing might on the list be they will be carrying weapons. So, if someone is carrying weapon, yes, tick. Second, they will be wearing a turban and have long beard. Yes, second tick. Yes. The third pattern would be that they will be traveling with large number of people, 5, 6 people, 2 vehicles or something like that. Tick. We have our pattern and let's push the button. But on the other side, if you look at it, everyone in that area carries weapon. Everyone in that area has a beard and a turban. That turban is part of their culture, beard is part of the religion. Carrying a weapon is part of their culture. They always, a Pashtun of that area does not consider himself to be a Pashtun if he doesn't have a weapon, and that too be an automatic. And the third, traveling in group. It's a society which has bigger families. When we interview, we had a documentation project a couple of months ago, and we had some academics from US who were visiting Pakistan, and they were asking questions, and I was laughing in the background actually when they were asking from the victims or the witnesses, how many people live in your house? And the person would say 40, 50, 67, because this is how the houses are there. Like all houses are compound, it's a joint family system. When people are traveling, they'll be traveling with a couple of uncles, dozen of cousins, or like that. So if you're looking at a pattern like this to take out targets, basically you're killing the citizens, civilians. And it's really hard for them without proper ground intelligence. And then you also have to question the ground intelligence, like who are the people who are on the ground correcting information for you? Have they been trained? Are there any standards? Do they know what is a credible information or what is a hearsay for that matter? So basically you are acting on a very unreliable information on the ground, even someone pointing out, and then you have a checklist which is being made here, which is highly unreliable, and you end up killing mostly civilians. And another point is that if you're killing 3,000 people, you might have killed 50 targets at once. This is what is happening.
I have a question to you, Mr. Shahzad, and being a journalist from Pakistan, I would ask the question from a Pakistani perspective. As you just mentioned, that President Obama has ordered and issued escalation of drone strikes in Yemen, and as you would know, our Foreign Minister, Ms. Kerr, she just issued a statement 2 days ago that we are compelling the United States to stop drone strikes, but they are not listening to us. So how are we going to make them listen to us?
Actually, I'm very happy you asked this question. What Ms. Hurst didn't use the word compelling. She said we are asking, which is more like begging. And the next sentence of her quote was, I hope they listen to us. Now, this is not what we expect of a government. We are not asking, this is what our campaign is like in Pakistan. We are not asking even in court that they should shoot a drone down. Our lawsuit in Peshawar High Court, which we filed against Pakistani government, asked them to take few steps. The first step is that take this issue to United Nations Security Council. I mean, you shouldn't be going to US and complaining, oh, can you please stop drones? They're not going to stop it like that. You have to take this matter to an international forum where it can be actually argued, and you have to put forth your case. Similarly, you can go to the International Court of Justice. You can be with the help of Reprieve. We filed a complaint before the United Nations Human Rights Council. We are asking government through that lawsuit that they join in actually as a government, and they start independent inquiry into looking into how many civilian casualties are there. And we have reasons to believe that actually government is recording all the drone strikes, and they actually collect information. It's all that needs to be done is that they need to put out the numbers, and they're afraid actually to put out the numbers because they know that once people get to know what really is happening, they're going to complain. Similarly, like in United States, because I think people here need to make informed decisions. Right now, it's not informed decision because people in the United States are, the poll you mentioned, it's there just because people are not informed what really is happening. They are told that drone is actually making them safe, and then you're asking them a question that or do you support drone? Because if you only given them information that they are making us safe, who is going to say that no, I don't support drone? So you have to have informed decision before you actually make a decision if it's a good thing or not.
I want to add to that we have responsibilities as American citizens, and I think it's a shame that we've waited this long in the case of our organization to have this drone summit, because this has been going on now since 2002 in the case of Yemen, 2004 in the case of Pakistan, and so many innocent people have been killed. I think our government has kept it from us. It's a secret program, the one in Pakistan run by the CIA. I had a chance to talk to somebody from the CIA in a public forum, and he refused to even acknowledge that the program existed. This is the best kept secret, just like perhaps Israeli nuclear weapons. One pretends it's a secret, but it's known to the rest of the world. So I think that the American people have to take control of what our own government is doing in our own name. And as Shahzad said, this is not making us safer here at home. I did this book called Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, and I have a whole chapter in here on the victims. And it breaks your heart to hear the stories and to understand how little the American people know about what's being done. The fact that 8 out of 10 Americans showed in the latest ABC Washington Post poll that they support drone strikes on terrorist suspects shows that we have a lot of education work to do in the United States, and we have a lot of work to do on demanding that our Congress do real oversight over this program, demanding that they take back this power from the executive to be able to decide who to kill, when, and where, but that we, the American people, ought to stop standing up and saying no to this program.
Nisa Islam, Press TV. My question is, you mentioned that the Americans don't know a lot of what's going on about this issue. So what should Americans be doing? Once we know more about drone killings and what's going on, what should Americans be doing? Yes, Mr. Shah.
I think then you need to make the decision. I mean, whatever the decision is, your lawmakers are to respect that. But I believe in humanity that we as humans cannot make very illogical decisions. I mean, if you really inform what drones are doing right now and how faulty this system is. I mean, I was just speaking with Scott before this interview and saying that we are not necessarily, I or my organization is not necessarily anti-drone technology. I mean, technology has nothing to do, it's us humans who actually control and decide. So if the drones are not being used in an accountable and transparent manner, it can be a tool for law enforcement, but as long as it is under the rule of law. You have to have certain principles which have to be in conformity with the existing principles which have been developed over centuries of civil rights work and constitutional reforms and all. So we have to bring this technology under the systems which are time tested and which are there in place and in systems. I mean, Pakistani constitution is pretty much like American constitution, and they are civil liberties, human rights, fundamental rights guaranteed under that. So we have to respect that. And if we're using it as a law enforcement tool, we should be just using it as the other tools are being used, with a check, a congressional oversight in the United States. And then some sort of, I mean, then the American people have to question that why we are having this, why are we going around the world and killing people? I mean, is it really necessary? I mean, are we eliminating the threat of extremism or the terrorism against the United States, or are we building or making more enemies? Because you have to ask questions, what have we achieved for the last 10, 11 years of war? I mean, you've gone thousands of miles away and you created a new enemy. You were fighting against Al-Qaeda, and now Taliban is also your enemy. Al-Qaeda is only a few dozen people, Taliban are hundreds of thousands of people. So you have to ask these questions from your research.
I have a question about domestic drone use. It came out a few months ago that there was a man in North Dakota arrested using evidence received with the drone. Are you guys aware of any other cases where an American citizen has been arrested with the help of a drone? In that case, essentially a police department called in Homeland Security, and a border drone was flown in to surveil his farm, and then the police came in and made an arrest. But it didn't come out for a few months that the drone was used in that case.
The Washington Post reported that a drone was used in a police raid, like a SWAT raid on a house.
Right.
That's the only other one that I'm aware of. The question that was really raised in that case that you mentioned was the fact that, Customs and Border Patrol was allowing its drones, which were supposedly, tasked with protecting the borders, to be repurposed for domestic law enforcement with no authority, with no rules or regulations, with no public notice or discussion. And so, I think that is a sign of where we can expect things to go if we don't speak up and demand that, good rules and regulations be put in place to make sure that this technology is not overused. Things that are easy to use become overused by the police. We've seen that in many different contexts.
No, I'm not aware, but that same police department had called in the drones, and that's what they say. We called in the drones 36 times over the past year and a half or so. They don't go into urban areas, and one of the reasons it was in that area is there's a military base where the drones are stationed. There's a close connection between DHS and the military. DHS cannot function without these military bases. So where it's going to happen is around the military bases. And in terms of the congressional oversight, what's happening now is that there's a booster element in Congress, and they're pushing for the use of these drones for border sheriffs. There was testimony in Congress this year where the border sheriff saying, we want real-time images from these drones for our law enforcement, and the head of the committee was pushing for that to happen. So it's a danger.
How are they being used on the borders now? Is it a surveillance thing only, or are they being used to make arrests of people crossing the borders?
Yes, they are. They have statistics. The stats that they have aren't very reliable. They're very small. There are drug seizures. It's all marijuana. 46,000 pounds of marijuana in several years. About 7,000 immigrants. And we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars. So there is some cost, even if you agree that we should protect our borders from immigrants and marijuana. There's some cost-effective questions about, is this the way we should do it?
I have a question to Mr. J. You told us while you were talking about FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, issuing certificates of authority for the usage of drones. I have the question, do they keep a check on the drones flying inside the United States, or do they have a check on the drones being used by the military as well? Number two, you mentioned something about the US Supreme Court as well. Does US Supreme Court have any role about monitoring, or about, let's put it like this, has taken any notice of the drone strikes US is carrying outside its boundaries, or can it?
I think the answer to both your questions is no. The FAA does not regulate. I'm not an expert in aviation law, but the FAA does not, to my knowledge, do any regulation of aircraft outside the United States. They may have some sort of cooperative arrangement with other countries in terms of handing aircraft off that are traveling internationally. Other than that, I don't believe so. And the Supreme Court has issued some rulings on aerial surveillance, but nothing directly on drones, and so it remains to be seen what the limits of surveillance that the Supreme Court might impose on aerial surveillance. We certainly think that there's plenty of, we think that they ought to extend the Constitution to protect individuals from pervasive drone surveillance. We don't know whether they will, and the rulings are complicated based on various cases. I don't know that they've addressed drones abroad at all. That's not my area of expertise.
And are these yes.
Just on the question of what the courts have said with respect to lethal drone strikes, our case, Al-Awlaki versus Obama, was filed in the district court, the first court level in the United States. And the argument the government made, which is the argument they make in virtually every national security related type case, is first about whether the court even has the power to hear the case. Mm-hmm. So they raise certain defenses about matters of national security being within the exclusive realm of the political branches or the president's responsibility and not the business of the courts. That's the argument they made in our case. The judge in our case at the district court level again accepted that argument. That particular case was not appealed. So the appellate courts and the Supreme Court certainly have not had a chance yet to rule on that issue. What the Supreme Court has said, however, in cases that are the most similar, I guess, to this context is in the context of detention cases. For example, with respect to people detained at Guantanamo, where the government, again, sort of in this context of the war on terror, argued that these are matters of national security, involve very sensitive classified information, that it would intrude on the business of the military and military strategy. And the Supreme Court in that case rejected those arguments about whether the court can even have a role in reviewing what the president and the political branches are doing. So it is a bit hopeful in that sense that in terms of cases that are the most similar to what we're talking about here, at least with respect to the role of the courts to review the president's actions, they have said that is possible, that is important in the detention context, and they have not yet said anything.
So that particular case which your organization had filed in some court at the district level, that had been dismissed?
That was dismissed on the sort of threshold issues of whether the court could even have a role in reviewing.
File an appeal in the high court?
The case was not appealed, and that was a decision that our client, we represented the father of Anwar al-Awlaki. That was a decision he made, in consultation with us. So that particular case was not appealed, but that is only a district court opinion. So it is certainly not binding on any other court, and the Supreme Court has not spoken on the issue of whether the president's claimed authority to be able to carry out targeted killing of U.S. citizens in this case without the judicial branch having anything to say about it. That question has not been addressed yet by the Supreme Court.
So I think we'll close. Does Sam, did you?
Yeah, if I could follow up.
Yeah.
One or two things. Is there any prospect of that being adjudicated?
Well, that particular case is dismissed. Certainly the U.S. has carried out the actual killing of U.S. citizens, both Anwar al-Awlaki, Samir Khan was another U.S. citizen killed in the same strike, and then Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. So those killings have occurred. Litigation with respect to them or any number of other strikes could be brought, certainly.
If I understood Mr. Akbar correctly, he said that all or many drones, there are records of all of the drone strikes. You mentioned you're doing a Freedom of Information requests. How extensive are those requests, and have they attempted to tap into what I think he alluded to?
So the specific request I referred to was with respect to a particular strike in Yemen in December of 2009. In the region of Al-Majla, it was in December 17th of 2009 that killed 41 people. That request is to 8 different government agencies of the Department of Defense and the State Department. There is also two separate requests by the ACLU with respect to the targeted killing program more globally and more generally. That request is now being litigated in the courts and is actually at the appellate court level at this point. So there are other FOIA requests that get at the program, the lethal program more broadly. But the request we just filed last week was with respect to a particular strike.
In terms of general information, is it your assessment as well that they have extensive records of video and so on that they've been kept? I mean, this is sort of akin to the torture, when we found out belatedly that there were videos of the waterboarding and then they miraculously disappeared.
I am guessing that certainly there are records kept and there are authorizations that exist and there are authorizations, at least with respect to the killing of U.S. citizen al-Awlaki, a specific authorization, excerpts of which have been reported in the New York Times. There are specific concrete documents that we know exist and that have been reported. So certainly, at least with respect to those, the government should disclose them. But I'm sure certainly there are authorizations and documents that exist.
There are a couple, the reported ones I mentioned were reported from the Pakistani government. So during our investigations, we came across a couple of documents which are reporting people being killed in drone strikes inside Pakistan. And we'll be turning that into a lawsuit as well, going to the government and asking that look, here exists a government document, and now we like to have information that you have collected information of all the killings and which people you have labeled as civilian or militants, because we have no idea so far. We've only been able to have copies of 2 such incidents of strikes where they have actually reported. And this goes from a very low-level government civil servant to the governor of that province. So there's a whole chain of command which is involved on reporting, at least that. And secondly, on access to information, we are also bringing claims against the allies of United States in drone program. For example, UK. United Kingdom have publicly declared that they have been providing intelligence for drone programs in Pakistan. So one particular drone program strike of 17th March 2011, we have challenged in British High Court in London very recently with the help of our partners in UK, where we are asking for role of British government in providing any sort of intelligence which has led to that particular strike. And now that case is before the High Court in London, because first we asked from the Ministry of Defence and they refused to answer. They say we cannot deny or accept existence of any such intelligence we provided, because that's a matter of national security. So, but we have gone to court there to get that information publicly.
So I want to wrap up by acknowledging that just to get the information about the permits that have been given out by the FAA for the use of drones here in the United States was only obtained by a Freedom of Information Act request. That was not given out voluntarily. And I think whether we're talking about drones at home or overseas, the entire program is shrouded in secrecy and is not befitting of a democratic government. So that is why we're doing the Drone Summit. We hope to shine the light on this issue. We invite you to join us on Saturday, starting at 9 a.m. at the Mount Vernon Methodist Church. And if you can't come, it will be live streamed, and we will also have recordings of this afterwards. So thank you for coming today. If you want to interview any of the speakers, please feel free to do that afterwards. Thank you.